Rabbi Julia Andelman, Director of Community Engagement at JTS, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. This is part of our Living a Life of Meaning webinar series, exploring our core values and what's most important to us in the context of a time of great disruption and encounters with mortality that have pushed us to think about what's most central in our lives. I just want to acknowledge a lot has happened since our last webinar last week, and I don't want to presume any political position of any of our participants, but just kind of to note that that there may be a lot of emotion going on for all of us. Okay, but back to our regularly scheduled program. So I want to especially welcome any first-time attendees, and if you want to view recordings of past sessions, you can do that using the link in the email that you received from Lynn Feynman this morning. And today's session will be taught by Professor Jeffrey Kress, who is the Dr. Bernard Heller Chair in Jewish Education at JTS. The session is on nurturing character, community, and meaning making through Jewish education. So this is a different kind of session that we've had in the past, bringing in a faculty member of our William Davidson Graduate School of Jewish Education at JTS. And we're thinking about these questions of larger meaning in the context of what we transmit to the next generation. So we're so pleased that, that Dr. Kress is going to lead us through that exploration today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tani Schwartz-Herman to give us some instruction.
Hey, thank you, Rabbi Andelman. So just a couple of notes about the Q&A. Dr. Kress will pause for questions periodically throughout the class. We will also have a Q&A period at the end. You can use the chat feature to submit your question to Rabbi Andelman. To open the chat, hover your cursor over the bottom of the Zoom screen and click on the chat icon. During the Q&A period, Julia will select a few of the questions to present to Dr. Kress. Please note that you will only be able to chat with JTS staff. You will not be able to send messages to the group or to Dr. Kress. For technical and logistical questions, you can initiate a private chat with either myself or with Lynn Feynman. For those of you who have called in only, you will unfortunately not be able to ask a question, but please consider joining via Zoom for our future sessions. The sources, the material for today's class were in the email that you received with the Zoom link for the session this morning. We also post a link shortly in the chat. Dr. Kress, I believe, will also be sharing the PowerPoint as well on screen. So I'm just going to briefly introduce Dr. Kress, and his full bio is in the PowerPoint as well. Dr. Kress is the Dr. Bernard Heller Chair in Jewish Education and the Director of Research at the Leadership Commons of the Davidson School. Dr. Kress's interests include social, emotional, and spiritual development and education. He has written about experiential Jewish education, particularly as it takes place in formal settings. He is also conducting research and professional development on inclusion of learners with disabilities in camp settings. His most recent book is Nurturing Students' Character, Everyday Teaching Activities for Social Emotional Learning, which he co-authored with Dr. Maurice Elias. Now going to turn it over to Dr. Kress.
Okay. Am I unmuted? Yes. Okay. I see nodding heads. This is good. And now I'm going to try to share my screen. So let's see how we'll make that work. We're going to do this. It helps me to narrate while I do this. I get it wrong less often. So let's do that. And then we're going to show that. And okay, so can you see the first slide? If you could see the first slide, should just be an overview, a title. Give me a wave. Yes, all right, good. We're off to a great start. So thank you, it's really good to be here.
you have the first slide and also your own notes up, which I'm not sure you wanted.
That is not what I had wanted. So we're not off to such a great start. So let's try that again.
Before the last thing that you clicked, we were good.
Yeah. Okay. Better?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, just give me one moment to. All right. So what I'm going to need to do is just reorient myself a little bit.
I think it might be best if we share the presentation for you, and then you can have your own notes.
Okay, sure. Why not? So I'm going to unshare.
Okay, so just give me 1 minute. I'm going to go ahead and share that for you.
Alternatively, I could do that one more time and just switch my camera, which there, I've just done. So why don't I just go back to sharing? I think that'll work. Okay, how are we doing?
We're good so far.
All right, so terrific. All right, so thanks, and I'll start again now that things might be working. Thanks, I'm really excited to be here. I should say this is not my usual venue for speaking. I spend a lot of time doing public speaking. Most of that time I work with educators, and I go to schools and camps and youth groups and work with educators on how to best build community and create the context where meaning can be made. So I'm particularly excited to be here talking to a bit of a different group than I'm usually with. As Rabbi Andelman mentioned, this might be a little bit of a different twist than some of the sessions that you've been going to that might have been more text-based. I'm going to share a glimpse into the sort of work that I do when I work with Jewish educators. And just to get oriented about how the session's going to go, I'm going to start by giving some general ideas. We'll break for a Q&A. Then we'll come back and I'll get into some practical implications of what the ideas could look like in Jewish educational settings. Then we'll do another Q&A for a longer time at the end there. So, though, you know, just as you heard, text, chat in your questions, and we'll take it from there. To start with, what I'd like to do is show you this. This is a mood meter. For those of you who are on the phone, you can't really see this, but this is a tool that was developed by a group at Yale University. It's a lexicon of emotions. And as Rabbi Andelman mentioned, it's been an emotional week, whichever side of the political spectrum you may be on. You may adjust. Oh, okay. Sorry. I was just looking at text. Those are not specifically for me. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is just think about locating yourself on this rubric here. How are you feeling right now? And if we could chat each other, I would have asked you all to chat. So we would see some trends. And you would see a variety of emotions that we're experiencing right now. This has been a particularly complex week in terms of our emotions. We might have felt very differently on this board if I checked in at different times, even within one day. You might have located yourself at all different points in this. So why is this relevant? Because even though this week was somewhat outstanding in terms of its, and I don't mean outstanding, I mean, some of you will be outstandingly excited, some outstandingly disappointed. Outstanding, I mean, you know, intense in terms of the emotional experience. When we're talking about Jewish education, you can't put aside the emotional experience. Our learners come into their learning environment with all kinds of emotional experiences. Sorry, I'm trying to see if any of these chats are meant for me.
I opened the chat temporarily so people
great.
can
Okay.
your question.
Thank you. So no, it's not every week that brings a presidential election, but our learners come in with all kinds of more local emotional ups and downs, drama with friends and frenemies, I love that word, frenemies, parental conflicts, issues going on at the home, high pressure in school. And I mention this because all of it's very relevant to how we make meaning of our experience. We interpret the world through our emotions. People could experience the exact same thing and apply very different frameworks for meaning. Meaning isn't something that's out there waiting for us to sort of stumble over. We actively create meaning, and our emotions are a big part of that. And just like we can spend a lifetime understanding our emotions, and my background, I'll say a little bit more about this later, but I have a degree in clinical psychology. I spent a lot of years trying to figure out emotions, and we're all still working on it. Meaning making is also a lifelong, ever-evolving process. So I'll cover a few ideas in our time together today. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more, and I welcome you to be in touch at any point after this session and to speak more, whether you're an educator, whether you're someone who deeply cares about education in your community. Let's define terms just for a few minutes to get started. First of all, I keep using the term Jewish education. I am using that term broadly. My work involves research and professional development for people that work in ... day schools, synagogue schools, supplemental schools, camps, youth groups, etc. So while all of what I'm going to say plays out differently in these different contexts, I'm trying to talk about Jewish education broadly in the various contexts it takes place. This is not an exhaustive list. I'm going to focus today mostly on youth education, kids, as opposed to adult education. Again, I have what to say about adult education, but that'll be material for another talk. So what do we mean? So that was thinking about Jewish education as a definition. Now comes the harder one. What do we mean in psychological and educational terms when we say meaning, or what is the meaning of meaning? A bit more complicated. And over the past few years, I've had the opportunity to explore this, not only as I go out and talk to people in schools, but also I'll just mention two exciting events. The first was a roundtable discussion in which we had leading behavioral researchers. So for example, Dr. Richie Davidson, the guy psychologist who is known for work with the Dalai Lama and kind of hooks Buddhist monks up to these brain scans and takes the brain waves, sitting around the table with Jewish thinkers, Yitzhak Greenberg, Rachel Cowan, Neil Gilman, and others, talking about this question of meaning. And the second was a conference a couple of years ago actually called The Meaning of Meaning. So here I'm going to talk to you about the meaning that emerged from the meaning of meaning. So, this is endlessly recursive. And one of the things that emerged is that we could think about different layers of meaning. First, what we might call factual or descriptive meaning. The Hebrew word sus means horse. All right, I just used the word meaning. That is one way to talk about meaning. Might not be the most interesting for our case here. The second is as a synonym for relevance, the ability to relate an object or idea to one's life. So horses are, it's not just that sus means horse, but susim, horses, are meaningful animals to me because I grew up on a farm. Iguanas, not so meaningful to me. So that's another way of using the term meaning. And I should note that we make meaning of this sort automatically. We tend to tie things together. We see our life as a story, a narrative. And sometimes that narrative doesn't even need to be so factually correct. I mean, it could be that, 20 people grew up on farms and only one of them, horses, is meaningful, or are meaningful, sorry. But we string these things together into narrative meaning. That doesn't mean it's a passive project, but rather that it happens automatically. We interpret our experiences in a way that does or doesn't provide meaning. The third layer is really what I think the kind of gold standard of what we're looking for in Jewish education and life in general, which is meaning as life purpose, or as some people call it, meaning with a capital M. or what is referred to sometimes as existential meaning. So I'm keeping with the horse theme. I'm not sure why I was into horses when I made the slideshow, but there's a horse in case you were interested. My work rehabilitating abused horses provides meaning to my life. These are all hypotheticals. I don't work rehabilitating abused horses. Horses are lovely. They don't have a particular meaning in my own life, but these are examples. And you could see here that this last layer is more of an organizing, positive direction for one's life. It's not just a statement of fact, it's a statement of intention for the future. I do this, and as I move ahead, this will help guide me. In their book, Exploring Existential Meaning, Optimizing Human Development Across the Lifespan, the researchers Recker and Chamberlain use this definition: a cognizance of order, coherence, and purpose, pursuit and attainment of worthwhile goals. You could read through here. A person with a high degree of existential meaning has a clear life purpose, a sense of directedness, strives for goals consistent with life purpose, feels satisfied with past achievements, and is determined to make the future more meaningful. So one thing you could see from this definition is how hard it is to define meaning without using the word meaning. I think there is sort of a challenge there, that it's, we all sort of know what we are talking about, but actually writing out the definition becomes very difficult. But you could also see that when we talk about meaning, it's very much wrapped up in our connection to the world in general, how we find purpose in life and strive to meet goals that are consistent with that purpose. But can we teach meaning, or even a process for meaning making? So in case you haven't figured it out, this is a rhetorical question. We're shifting to the role of Jewish education here. This rhetorical question, I don't want to give you the answer, but I'll give you a hint. The answer is not yes. Okay. So the answer to can we teach meaning or even a process for meaning making is really no. There is no blueprint. There is no right answer to making meaning or how we make meaning. Again, two people could sit and experience the exact same thing, and in the end, they come out with a very different sense of meaning there. If there were a blueprint, if there were a thing called meaning that we could go out and have people memorize, life would be easier, because then we could just teach that. But we don't know what the future holds. So we could reassure kids, we could explain things to them, but we have to help them develop the ability to figure things out on their own. And as a parent, I know that that's really tough. I want to explain the meaning of events in the world to my kids. And I do, and we all do. But ultimately, we have to work on two levels. We have to explain things, and we have to help people figure it out for themselves. Because our kids and our grandkids are going to experience challenges to their sense of meaning that we can't anticipate. We are not preparing kids for a static world. I mean, just think about it. A few years ago, who knew that we would be searching for meaning in a time like this? Who would have guessed that we'd be here? What brilliant educator a few years ago would have said, you know what? I'm going to prepare them because I think there's going to be a pandemic. That wasn't on people's minds. Instead, we have to help people develop the capacity to make meaning on their own. We can't provide that blueprint. I just want to say a quick word about how I came to this and why I'm asking these questions. My path was somewhat nonlinear. As I said, I went to graduate school to become a clinical psychologist, and based on my experience teaching out in schools and just being out in the world a little bit, I thought that I would have no want for clients. There are a lot of kids who need clinical intervention, and I thought I would go out and put up my shingle and it would be, you know, Jeff Kress, clinical psychologist. And what happened is when I went to graduate school at Rutgers, I'm actually speaking to you from Highland Park, New Jersey, which is right across the river from Rutgers. Some of you may know about it. I started learning about a different sort of approach to clinical psychology. And that was clinical psychology through a preventive lens. And what that meant was, why do we wait until someone, let's say a kid or a teenager, starts showing signs of anxiety, of depression, of not being able to cope? Why do we wait until there's a problem and then say, you need intervention? We don't like to do that anywhere else. We don't like to say, you know what, when you start having cavities, we'll take you to the dentist. I mean, that's not how we think about health in any other way. So why shouldn't we be thinking about, well, what does everyone need? We all need to brush our teeth, not just the kids who are more prone. I mean, there is, you know, some people are more prone to cavities. It's not just the kids who are more prone to cavities who need to brush their teeth. We all of our kids experience anxiety. All of our kids experience times where they are depressed. They all need to figure out and help figuring out how to cope with the emotional ups and downs in life. We all need this. So why don't we, as a public health, I mean, think about the levels of anxiety that are out there now. Now it's making the news. Kids are more anxious than ever. It wasn't like kids were just chilling out and relaxing before COVID. These schools that these kids are in are very tough in terms of competition. It starts early. The kids are worried about which high school they're going to get into, which elementary school they're going to get into. It's really hard, and it trickles down to them. We can't shelter them from it. So why not work to help them develop the sort of skills for coping and managing these stresses in life? And what I did professionally before I came to JTS was I went around to schools, because schools are wonderful venues for doing this. People spend a lot of time in school. And I worked with teachers, mostly in public schools, through the community mental health centers of New Jersey, where I was living. And I helped teachers set the stage for their students developing emotional intelligence, developing social skills, and developing problem-solving skills while they were learning math and science and social studies. And it occurred to me, as someone who's always been deeply rooted in Judaism, I had an extensive and expensive Jewish education growing up. It occurred to me as someone who, at the time I didn't have kids, but I knew that I would want my kids to have a solid Jewish education. If I could work with teachers who are doing this work in science and math, all the more so, we could do this with Bible. We could help build positive identities, coping strategies through Jewish history, through rabbinic literature. If we could do it in social studies, we could do it in Jewish education. So when I had a chance to come to JTS, and I jumped at that. I was really excited. And what I did, what I've been doing in the years since I've been here, is trying to make that connection. So if we can't give a blueprint, and we can't teach what meaning is, what can we do? And here, I think, is what we could do. We can create the readiness for meaning making. We can set the stage so that as people go through Jewish education over the years, they are more likely to emerge as the type of people who could create meaningful lives and with a positive sense of purpose. And as the general framework that I'll be using for the rest of this talk, there are a couple of elements. The first is there are certain skills and dispositions, certain elements of character that make it more likely that someone's going to be able to develop a sense of meaning. These skills, dispositions, and elements of character relate to how we understand ourselves. If we can't understand ourselves and our own experience, we're not going to be able to make meaning of things, and how we understand and interact with the world around us. I'll get into more detail about this, but just bear in mind for now, the first part of the framework is skills and character and dispositions. The second part of the framework is creating environments that are conducive to meaning making. We sometimes think of meaning, or we always think of meaning making as something that happens inside of a person. Educators flip that. We think about environments that are conducive to meaning making. It's sort of like creativity. We always talk about people, this is a creative person, this is not a creative person. An educator stops and says, you know what? What is an environment that's conducive to creativity? Even when I put in a non-creative person into this environment, they're more likely to show creativity. And that's what we're doing here. And of course, these things are related. The more skilled people are in knowing about themselves and interacting with other people, the more positive our climates and environments are going to be. I'm going to get into the details of what type of environments we're talking about and what skills we're talking about. And the more that our environments promote positive behaviors, the more we'll be able to develop those skills. But there's one more layer. This I could teach, and I have taught to educators in any school, public, private, et cetera, et cetera. We have one more layer here. And it's a really exciting layer because it makes the other things easier in a way, in that we want to ground this work in Jewish learning. We want to ground this work in Jewish text and tradition. All right, so, and I'm going to stop in about 5 minutes for Q&A. And first, I'm going to just give a little bit of a sense of how, what are some of the dynamics of meaning making? So the first is that the importance of skills and environment, that was the last slide, skills and environment. It's underscored by underlying assumptions about how meaning is made. Number one, meaning is made interpersonally. There's so many sources to cite here, but you gotta cite Buber for something like this. It just, wouldn't be right. Though we may not use the gendered language today, when Buber says, as some people today assume that it's all about the self. Now, he was writing this in the 60s. Those people are still saying it's all about the self. And as Jewish educators, we push back on that because we realize that self and meaning is made interpersonally. As Buber says here, it's made between men through the mutuality of the making present, in making present of another self, in the knowledge that one is made present in his own self by the other, together with the mutuality of acceptance of affirmation and confirmation. It's not all about the individual. To create meaning, we need to forge relationships. We need to see ourselves through the eyes of others, and we need to see others as images of the divine. And the COVID context has both challenged this and reinforced this. I mean, one of the most fascinating things when you ask people about the COVID context is A, how difficult it is to connect interpersonally, but B, and this is where I think it's exciting, how creative people have been in figuring out how to connect interpersonally. People have Friday night dinner, you set the computer up, if you don't use the computer on Shabbat, you eat early, and you have people sitting around the table who are in California and Israel. There are friends who I've had more contact with in the past 6 months than I did in the couple of years before that, because I realized it's really vital. You can't just assume, I'll see them at the next college reunion. You gotta make that time, because it's not just comforting, it's not just fun. It makes us who we are. It gives our life meaning. The second quote is from Rabbi Rachel Cowan from the Institute of Jewish Spirituality. Meaning involves connecting to something larger than ourselves. And she puts it beautifully here in the educational context. That as Jewish educators, there are ways to help kids be able to see the image of God in the other kids in the classroom. Talk about like looking at something beyond yourself. They may not even have to like them. They don't have to like these other kids, but at least to see that that spark is there so they can really develop empathy and kindness. And to have experiences in nature, so important to really sense where we are in the universe. To have this kind of humility that it isn't all about us. It's not all about my story. I and the world around me, I, thou, and the thou that I can't see right in front of me, the greater thou, are all interconnected. And this is the sort of thinking that leads us to meaning and purpose, because it brings us into engagement with the world. And to create these relationships, to create these connections with others, we need readiness skills. Our learners have to be able to show empathy. They need reflectiveness, self-awareness. They need to understand how they're feeling. A lot of kids have a very short list of emotional terms that they apply to themselves. They feel good, bad, or bored. How you feeling today? I guess we could add to the list. Good, bad, bored, or to help learners really understand their experience and what they're going through, we have to help them develop the language for emotions like you saw in that first slide. And that language could be in Hebrew, that language could be in English. And they need these skills in order to create sense of meaning. They'll need to be in relationship, and they're going to need to stay focused and calm themselves down. Self-regulation means to not just understand your emotions, but to use your emotions to keep you moving forward, rather than them sort of bogging you down and throwing you off track. Because there's a lot that's going to challenge our sense of meaning, things we can't anticipate. And if we don't have the coping skills to move forward, we're not going to be able to preserve any sense of meaning that we create. We create moments of deep connectedness, wonder, and awe. And I'll show one more quote that I really like before we take 5 minutes for Q&A. This is from Rabbi Nancy Flam, who is at the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, National Center for Jewish Healing, was a participant in the roundtable that I mentioned. Meaning gets made mostly affectively or emotionally, the feeling of connected. And here she ties things into text and tradition, the biggerness, and I love that word, it's like the biggerness of Jewish history, literature, values, struggles, and triumphs. Jewish education is not just about the brain. It's about becoming part of the story. It's more than just knowing a lot of stuff. Although we do want people to have good Jewish literacy. I'm not saying, we should just feel good. This is not like I'm okay, you're okay. But ultimately, if you know the stuff and don't feel connected to it and don't see how it speaks to you and how you can speak to it, then that stuff that you know isn't really going to help you enrich your own life. And it's not really going to help you enrich the kihila, the community that we want to build. So with that in mind, I am going to pause and take some questions. I will say that if you're going to ask a question such as, what does this really look like when you go into a Jewish educational setting? I'm going to say I'll get to that. But beyond that, I'm happy to take a couple questions.
All right, Professor Kress, I have a bunch of really interesting questions that have come in. Most of them are really leaping off into different directions from what you've been talking about. So are you open to that?
Yeah, leap. I don't know how long I could pursue this without going off in a
Right.
tangent, but yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right. I'll start with the last question I got in was the most directly related. So why don't we start there, and then we'll jump off. So Nancy Warshawski was asking if Musar and work around Midot, around character traits and character development, can help children with creating meaning. And I'll just note that, just so you know, that early on in this series, Professor Eliezer Diamond did a session with us on Musar. So this group, in addition to whatever prior knowledge they have, has some familiarity from that session.
Okay, let me compose my thoughts to the answer of that one. Yes. Okay, but I'll say a little bit more. Yeah, I'm going to give you an example of a tool for Musar that's been used in schools. I'll do that in the second half of this presentation. I actually studied for a couple of years. I would go up and visit a school that was doing, it was a Jewish day high school that was doing Musar for kids and staff. And I think it's a wonderful example of how you could bring together rich sources and a sense of reflectiveness and how those sources connect to the real world. Because Musar is, as you've seen, it's more than, I mean, there is a Musar literature. I mean, you could give people the book and you could read Musar, but when it's really implemented in the world, it takes into account the realities of putting those midot, those character measures, into play. It's not just, well, I know I should be a good person. It's, well, what do you really need to do in order to show savlanut, for example, patience? So yes, we'll come back to that. Thank you.
Okay, I just got a question in from a middle school teacher, so I'm going to share that with you. So this is from Karen Fight. So she wrote, here's my concern. I'm teaching middle schoolers in a supplementary school. We're attempting to teach a values-based curriculum. Our students are dumbstruck. They do not have the tools to answer penned values-based questions. The public schools have been so data response-based. I don't know how to reach them. Help. Sorry,
I think I missed part of the question. We don't penned.
I'm not sure if that was a typo or not, but I think her point is, but she's trying to teach a values-based curriculum, and her students who are in public school the rest of the week, their education is all about responding to data, and they don't have the tools to do what she's asking them, what she's trying to teach them to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you know, obviously that's what I do for a living. You know, I spend hours working with middle school teachers, working with them around the technology. So obviously I can't get into it that much, but what I'd say is that's exactly right. We are not just teaching midot or values. We're teaching how to work with midot and values. We're teaching, and we're swimming upstream. I mean, the values that we want our kids to come away with are not the ones that they see out there in the world and that they see in their public schools necessarily. Public schools in a lot of the neighborhoods that these kids live in are extremely competitive. I mean, you know, to the point where a 0.01 difference in your GPA is going to make a really big difference in where you're going to go to college. And the take home from that is one of competition, is one of kind of trying to get the best of other people, not for everyone, obviously, but that's the sort of environment that we're talking about. So when we think about how to address these with our learners, we're really starting at square one, which is, what does it mean to be part of a community? Because they don't necessarily have a values-based community, because they don't necessarily have a model for that, because it may not be happening at their school. It's certainly not happening when they turn on whatever news that they watch online. They're not seeing interested, empathic, thoughtful deliberation and discussion about big issues. They're seeing people yell at each other. And I'm not, again, I don't want to get into political left, political right. You can't ignore it. I mean, it's just out there. So yeah, So to your question, in the middle schools, yeah, there's more to do even before teaching a curriculum. We can't just go in and say, here are some midot. We have to build the rationale. What kind of place do you want this to be as a learner? When we come together, even if it's for an hour a week, how do you want to feel when you're here? And how can we make that happen? Because some students don't even know it's plausible. And we have to open that for them.
Do you want to take one more?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this is from Alan Halpern. So he writes, it seems to me that much Jewish education historically and much rabbinic training is focused on explaining the meaning of ritual and tradition to Jews. And he wants to know what your research can help us understand about how we practice and live Judaism differently to help the average Jew gain the ability themselves to create meaning from practice and tradition. And then for him, that also raises a corollary question of, how and where do we define the norms of meaning, sort of what we want our tradition to mean, what it's okay for it to mean, in terms of defining boundaries of the community and what might be considered a heretical read on meaning.
Yeah, look, that's a question that the answer to which might differ in different communities. The conservative movement will have a view on that. And again, I'm not a theologian or a philosopher. The reform movement is going to have a different take on it. The Davidson School, we're a pluralistic school. We have people from across the range of Jews. And it's very interesting to see how that plays out. Because one person's heresy is another person's, kind of creative take on Judaism. So what's my personal opinion? My personal opinion goes back to Nancy Flamm's quotation before, Rabbi Nancy Flamm's quotation before, about seeing oneself within the flow of Jewish history, which is that, creativity, that we have to do both. We have to allow for input and for people to be able to make meaning and create energy and be creative around ritual. And at the same time, show how that ritual has extended through time and how their creative twists relate to what came before. Because we don't want every new generation starting a new Judaism. We want every generation shaping the ongoing story of Judaism. So we have to do both. We have to work with the creative shaping, and we have to work with an ongoing long-range narrative. And I think that we could we could err on either side. We can err on, and we have erred on either side, and we continue to err on either side. That we could make ritual, you must do it exactly this way, and if you're not going to do it this way, you might as well not do it. I went to a school, went to Orthodox day schools, and I had many teachers very open, lovely. One teacher said, if you don't keep X, Y, and Z, you're not Jewish. All right, so there I go. I wasn't Jewish because I didn't keep X, Y, and Z. So there I've erred to one side. On the other side, you could sort of say, well, I'm going to do this, and it's just how I feel. And part of, and we saw that in the quotations that came before, part of meaning making is not just how I feel, it's how I feel connected to the flow of history and to a greater community. So we have to do both. We have to, sort of anchor and move at the same time. And that's it's two metaphors that are in opposition to each other, but that's the challenge. I mean, that's what we take in as Jewish educators. I mean, again, it's a tension.
Great. I think I'll save the questions that are a little more going to different directions for the Q&A at the end.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you for those really great questions. I sometimes feel like I should speak for 5 minutes and then do an hour and a half of questions, because each question could be like kind of endless because it's very exciting. So, all right. So remember, we're talking about environments that are conducive to meaning making, and building the skills for meaning making. So let's start with environments. And I could ask you to think about those times when you found meaning in your own lives. And the truth is, we could always find meaning in our own lives. I mean, if you read Viktor Frankl, who's found meaning in horrific circumstances, but we don't need, you know, that's certainly not a norm that we want. We want there to be an openness to meaning making. So we ask, is there a sense of safety in our meaning making environments to take risks and to ask questions? What do I mean by that? Obviously, you know, we talk about bullying and being an upstander. It's even more subtle than that. I say eye rolling is the enemy of meaning making. And you could see this, you see this, it's very subtle. Someone asks sort of a deep question, and it's almost like the eyes roll, there's a norm against asking a deep question. So before you could ask these questions, it's a matter of establishing that sense of respect that, all right, it wasn't your question, you think it's goofy, but we respect the person who asked that question and we give them the space to ask it. And if someone offers an answer that's outlandish or that they change their mind next week, that's okay. Because we have norms for how we interact. This gets at the issue of the learner's agency. We want learners to contribute to and help shape the community. And by the community, I mean multiple levels, within a classroom or a bunk, outside of a classroom or a bunk. How can our learners have a say and take responsibility beyond themselves? I mean, think about a synagogue. Our synagogue schools are sometimes sequestered. They're off on the side of the building. Some are in beautiful buildings. Some are off to the side and they share space with the early childhood, so that, you know, the 11-year-olds go in and their little Tonka trucks around or whatever there are. But still, they're separated. And the question is, well, take these 11 and 12-year-olds. Is there something that they could do, not just to make their school a better place, but to make their synagogue a better place? How can they contribute? How can we show them that they have the ability to impact on their environment? And we say to kids all the time, I mean, I have kids, they're getting a little older, but they watch a lot of kids' television. Mea culpa, but what can you do? And there, you know, there's always this, you could be anything you want, you could be anything you want. But the truth is we don't necessarily let them. You could be anything you want, but come and sit and take your test, because that's what you have to do. You can be anything you want, but you have to do well in the test first. But where do they realize, kids don't get the sense that they could be anything you want by telling them you could be anything you want. They get it from actually having an impact out in the world. Learners need to become part of that story. One way to think about this, and I think it's really powerful, is what if we wanted our Jewish educational learning environments, whatever those are, a day school, a class, a bunk, a camp, to become a microcosm of the sort of community we want to create, so that the learners have a sense of plausibility. This sort of thing can exist. A place where people care, where there's a sense of belonging, where there's active membership, where everyone counts. And Zoom, I mean, it's really interesting because for all the challenges of teaching on Zoom, Zoom's really forced us to think about these things. Zoom has forced educators to really think out things that they took for granted. We used to take for granted, kids are going to come and they're going to sit in the classroom, and when I start talking, they'll start learning. Now we're thinking about dynamics. How do we call on someone to speak on Zoom? How do we use breakout groups, and how do we script that? Because I'm the teacher, I can't be in every breakout group. Is it okay to chat when someone else is speaking? What are the new ground rules? How do I know when to chime in? What if I disagree with someone else? How do I show that and how do I express that? Why not name these things? Why not? These are the answers to those questions are rooted in Jewish values. They're rooted in kavod and respect and in seeing other people as existing b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Why not name these community building efforts so our learners, so they know their Jewish values that applied during the pandemic and always? We tend to treat these things as like, well, let's get through the building community stuff so we could get to our learning. The building community stuff is the learning. The building community stuff doesn't end. How does this look? What happens in a school or a class or a bunk where this kind of thing goes on? One is just how you make a transition. What happens when people go from being outside the learning space to inside the learning space? Again, Zoom has really helped clarify the importance of this. Kids are sitting at home. There's a whole world going on behind them. Teachers have had these great discussions. We're studying Limudei Kodesh, holy learning. How can you help make your learning space more holy? And some kids, they can't go to their own room because they don't have their own room. But still, maybe they could decorate in some way. They could put something that's meaningful next to them while they're learning. When students, I mean, there's great research that just giving a personal greeting, this was back before COVID, when you could actually give a personal greeting, like shake someone's hand, just giving a personal greeting on the way into a classroom increases the learner's engagement with material and reduces behavioral issues. It doesn't solve everything, it just reduces it. Why? Because when we know we count in a community, we care about that community. And when we think that we don't belong, then the only meaning we could make of that community is a negative meaning. If we think that we're not cared about, the only meaning we could make is a negative meaning. Let me tell, here's a great example. I love this example. I've been telling the story for a long time. A teacher in a day high school, Jewish day school, high school, started her class every week. You know, she meets with the kids 3 times a week. She starts the class every time going around. It was a relatively small class, like 10, 15 kids. What is something that you dedicate today's learning? To whom or what do you want to dedicate today's learning? And each person went around and said, I'd like to dedicate today's learning to, and they finished the sentence. Now, I'm an observer in the class. I learned so much about those kids just in the 5 minutes that it took. I want to dedicate this to my grandpa. He's supposed to come home from the hospital today. I want to dedicate this to our lacrosse team because we're going to the championships. You know, all of these things allow learners to be themselves, their full selves. It's not just, oh, I succeed in this classroom if I get things right in the test. But no, I am part of this class because of everything I bring in. And then the teacher would make a bracha, la'asok b'divrei Torah, to engage in the words of Torah, and they'd get on with their day. What a difference it made. What a way to get these kids thinking about their own lives and experiences while they were learning. And what a great way for the teacher to know what was going on in these kids' lives. And transitions out. I mean, just asking the kids on the way out, what's one thing that you found interesting today? You know, the kid has done so many things in the past hour that it's hard to remember, you know, it just kind of keeps rolling. What is one thing you found interesting today? If you went home and someone said, what'd you learn today? What's one thing you could tell them? Because you know what the usual response is. What'd you learn today? Nothing. You know, And it's a sort of understandable answer, because yeah, they learned a bunch of bits and pieces of material. They forgot half of it. They'll learn it again for the test. But what is something that really sticks with them? When does anyone ask them that? You could ask them that, a teacher could ask them that on the way out of the class. Meaningful learning, BRITOT. We, going back to that quote from Rachel Cowan, we want to see the image of God in our peers. So let's be concrete about it. What would this mean in the classroom to treat people as created in the image of God? And just like we have a covenant with God that's dynamic and evolves, let's think about how we interact with each other. What does that look like? If I think someone is created in the image of God, how do I disagree with them? I mean, I could disagree with them. We have a great history of people who disagree with God. How do I do that? How do I respect? What do I do to show respect? And the important thing is not necessarily what goes on the list of agreements, your classroom constitution, or whatever it is, but that it's generated together with the learners and that it's linked to bigger values. So it's not just here are the rules. A lot of people treat their classroom agreement like a rule book, and we're posting it on the wall so we can call it a BRIT. No, that's not what it's about. It's about agreeing to live together in a community with a higher value. And it's important to review the BRIT and amend it regularly. Back to that question about how things change over time. Our relationships always change over time. The BRIT with God is an evolving contract. And I'm not talking about some highfalutin, well, what is the nature of community, blah, 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 blah. I'm talking about the kind of conversation you can have with 12th graders and second graders. If we want this to be a place where we feel respected and can learn, how do we treat each other? So an example, a lot of kids, particularly younger kids, would say, we don't laugh. Okay, so obliging teacher puts up on the BRIT list, no laughing. They check back in a couple days. How are we doing with our agreements? No name calling, we're doing pretty well. No throwing things at each other, we're doing pretty well. No laughing, but wait a minute. We laugh a lot in this class. Is that bad? And then you could start having these really nuanced questions about what it means to interact and show respect, because life isn't a set of rules. We have to make up new rules for new situations. So understanding the difference between laughing with and laughing at is a great understanding to walk away with. And it helps us build relationships. It helps us build the type of communities that are going to be essential for meaning making. Shifting gears, building readiness skills. What are those interpersonal and intrapersonal, emotional intelligence, social competence, call it what you will. And the general framework that I use is one called social and emotional learning. It's very related to things you might have heard of, like mindfulness, like emotional intelligence, like character education. There are a bunch of other terms that are all interrelate here. But basically, what it means is moving the discussion of social skills, how we get along with others, how we understand ourselves, out of the background and into the spotlight. So it really becomes the object of what we're learning in school, along with reading, writing, and arithmetic, or Bible, Talmud, and Jewish history, or whatever it is. The truth is we always deal with social and emotional behaviors, but we tend to deal with them in their laps. We tend to, we see this all the time. A kid is like having an emotional breakdown, and you go over to them and suddenly you're the therapist. I want you to calm down. Okay, just take a deep breath. And yeah, you got to de-escalate when a kid is having an emotional crisis, but they're not learning at that moment how to deal with crises. They're not learning anything, because at that moment, they are having a fight or flight response. They are being emotionally hijacked, as the words in the words of Dan Goleman, who's written a lot about this. We can't teach social and emotional skills by getting kids in trouble or pointing out what they're doing wrong. We have to do it during times where learning can happen. And we have to show that it's embedded in Judaism and in how we live life every day. So what are these skills? There are 5 key areas of skill that are listed over on the right side. Self-awareness. Can I know how I'm feeling? I mean, it sounds like a silly type of thing, but for some kids, like I mentioned, they have a very impoverished sense of a language for emotions, or they find themselves deeply reacting to an emotion before they even know they're having it. I mean, there are kids who are screaming at someone else or having a fight before it's even processed that they're mad. So can we even understand? We teach kids feeling fingerprints. How does your body tell you that you're having a strong emotion? Because emotions are rooted in our physical sensations. And our physical sensations are part of what tells us we're having those emotions. Social awareness and empathy. Can I understand how someone else is feeling? Can I look at them and tell? What does their facial expression tell? How can I take their perspective? Even if I'm in a different situation from them, and I'm always going to be in a different situation than them in some way or another. How can I try to see their feelings and understand their feelings as embedded in what they're going through now? Self-regulation. When I was doing clinical training, there was a big poster up. It's okay to have any emotion, just don't let them have you. And I thought that was sort of a cutesy sort of way of saying that, yeah, it's fine. We all have emotions. The idea is to channel those emotions and to understand those emotions as motivators rather than derailers. Communication and friendship skills. When we interact in a community, what does it look like? What does it sound like? And a lot of kids aren't used to that these days. A lot of their interactions, I'm talking pre-COVID, a lot of their interactions are online, where we, as the adults, are sometimes a little shaky. We misuse terms, LOL or whatever. The kids know it better than we do. But when you get together, they might need some coaching. What does body posture for assertive communication look like? What is a tone of voice that is respectful? And these are things that can be practiced and prompted. And building problem-solving skills. When we have a challenge with one another, how do we confront that problem and challenge peacefully and respectfully? And in Jewish education, we link these things to bigger values. We're really good, and this was my initial, when I switched over from working in general education to Jewish education, my first observation is how good we are at working on the values level. Derech Eretz, Menschlichkeit, important stuff. Teachers talk about, they throw the words around all the time. Teachers in public schools wish they had words like this that they were allowed to throw around. But we can throw those around. But we don't often take the next step. What does Derech Eretz look like? What does Derech Eretz sound like? If we want a place where Menschlichkeit is the norm, how does that feel? What happens when there are challenges to our Menschlichkeit? We have to move beyond the value and link it with the everyday experience of the learners. And, for example, Bikor Cholim, we work on Bikor Cholim. And again, I have, a son with a medical condition. I'm very sort of given a lot of thought, more thought than I'd like to about Bikor Cholim. We tell our students how important it is We might take them on a visit to a nursing home or a hospital or whatever it is. But if we're not really processing that experience on an emotional level, we are not going to help our students make meaning of that, because doing Bikur Cholim correctly or well is complicated. Where do you stand? How do you know if you're supposed to speak? How do you know when you're supposed to be quiet? How do you know when you're supposed to step out of the room? Now, again, we can't instruct this. We can't give the kids a checklist of this is how you do Bikur Cholim. And that's not the goal here. But the goal is to have that our students understand that it's not just the intention, it's the action. I mean, we are an active religion. You know, we're used to getting into the weeds of action, you know, yes, you put your socks on both, sock shoe instead of socks, we're really in the weeds. But yeah, that's what meaning making is. If all we do is think, oh, it's important to visit the sick, and then we go and we feel uncomfortable and we feel like we made a mess of it, and we feel like, oh, I didn't like the sights, sounds, and smells of it, and I have nowhere to process that, because when I say that, everyone looks at me like I'm a bad person, then I'm not going to make positive meaning out of visiting the sick. In fact, I'm going to be hesitant to visit the sick again. And when I do, I'm going to try to get out of there as soon as possible, because there's an emotional reality, and we have to help our learners flex those muscles, those social skills that help us actualize the values. And we can practice these things in our curriculum. Our curriculum, again, I said we're lucky to have wonderful sources. How might Moses have been feeling when ... So it's not just abstract. Here are some words for feelings. What else could Joseph have done under this situation? Let's role play. How could Jacob have used assertive communication? And again, it's not just saying assertive communication is important and not just coaching it when there's a problem. It's practicing ahead of time. And this turns the curriculum, I would say turn it on its head, but that sort of implies that we're neglecting what came before. It enriches the curriculum. It raises up the social and emotional dynamics of the curriculum to be part of what it means to understand a text and what it means to study a text. It's not just knowing. I mean, when I was in school, we used to do mi amar el mi in these little workbooks, who said what to whom, and it would be mi amar el mi, who said what to whom. And there would be a quote, and there would be blank, le blank, and you would have to fill in. And look, I learned a ton of stuff, but I never learned that this stuff was supposed to inform my life. So I'm not saying, get rid of mi amar el mi. I'm saying it's great, understand the text. At the same time, understand that the text is getting at the same dynamics that we're getting at in our own worlds. Co-curricular activities, we're going to present in an assembly, or we went to the nursing home. How did that make us feel, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to skip thinking ahead, and I'm going to talk a little bit about spirit. And this gets back to what both Rachel Cowan and Nancy Flam said earlier about embracing the spirit as something that's larger to ourselves. And I sometimes do this activity when I'm in a room with people, because to me, the word spirit is such a fascinating word. I mean, we use it for so many different things. So what I sometimes do is I have half the room shut their eyes, and I show them the following slide, this slide. And I ask them to read the quote from Bereshit, the beginning of Bereshit, Ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim, the Spirit of God hovered on the face of the waters. And I ask them, while everyone else has their eyes closed, write down the feel that you get of that word that's underlined. And people will write things like calming, in control, order in chaos, the sort of idea that there's a spirit that's separate from the chaos. And then I have those people close their eyes. And I show the rest of have the other people open their eyes. I should mention that, or else it would be everyone sitting with their eyes closed, which would be very relaxing, but wouldn't get us far. So I have everyone, the rest of the people, then I show the rest of the people this slide. Another sense of ruach. We've got ruach, yes we do. We've got ruach, how about you? And if you've been to camp, you've heard this. And it's usually accompanied by people slamming the table, and making as much ruckus as possible. And I asked people on the other side of the room who now have their eyes open, what feeling tone goes with the underlined word? And they say pandemonium, they say excitement, they say exuberance. And then I show them, and then I have them read, everyone open your eyes, read the words, and I say, lo and behold, one group had a calming presence in the face of chaos, and the other had chaos and exuberance in life. And to me, this is an example, is a demonstration of two ways to think about spirit. And when we work with spirit in education, we work with both of these things. We want to provide moments of quiet reflection and focus, and we want to provide moments for exuberance. We want to provide moments for expression through arts, through nature. We want to address both ends, the spirit of quiet reflection and the spirit of banging on the table and saying, we've got ruach. And here, I'm going to swing around to a couple of things, including BRITOT, and then we wrap up. We want to bring together learning and self-reflection. So, for example, we all know this benzoma, benzoma from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, Parak Daled, fourth chapter, first verse. There's more here, but I just took out who is strong. Sorry, I don't have the Hebrew here. My Hebrew font, I have enough problems working PowerPoint. Hebrew font was giving me a lot of grief. But who is strong? One who overpowers his or her inclinations. Okay, I mean, we've heard that before. We post it in our classrooms and our bunks. We say it a lot. Taking a social emotional learning view to this then says, but how? When we have an inclination, but we want to shout, when we need to speak calmly, when we need to, we feel like running out of the classroom because we're anxious, but really we have to sit because, there's an exam coming and I have to deal with that exam. Sure, it's nice to say someone, good for you. You overpower your inclination. Bravo, brava, good. There's another way of looking at it, which is, how do you do that? And we teach kids breathing exercises. I mean, a lot of schools are now doing mindfulness. I was doing mindfulness before there was mindfulness. We were doing this for a long time. We teach kids how to breathe, how to recognize when they're starting to feel that anxiety or stress, and take deep breaths that would allow them to keep in engaged overpoweredness with their inclinations. And we process that with them. That becomes part of the discussion in the room. Not just what's the source, not just why it's important, but how we can make it part of our lives, how it becomes part of how we interact in the world, and therefore how we impose our own meaning or bring our own meaning to the world. This is the Midah monitor. This gets back to the idea this could be used in conjunction with Musar. What Midah are you working on? Describe a situation that felt that was challenging. How did you feel? Always comes back to feelings. If we don't understand our feelings, we're not going to understand the richness of that experience. How well do you think you used the Midah in this situation? What's something you liked? What's something you didn't like? And if it's a similar situation, how might you handle it differently? And this becomes an ongoing reflective tool, because our midot, even though we're done with the assembly about the midah, our midah doesn't end. Our work on that midah is ongoing. And a tool like this, look, you could do this in writing, you do this in conversation, you could do it online, however you want to do it. brings together not just the midah and the text, assuming that there was a text study that went on ahead of time, it structures the processing and connection of that text to life. It takes the text and brings it into one's existence. And I'll show you one more tool, and then we're pretty much done. So this is the Parsha problem-solving diary, and it's useful for many parshiot. Who in the Parsha is having a problem? What is the problem? And again, back to feelings. How are they feeling? How they solve the problem, so we don't leave the text behind. What does the text say about how they solve their problem? You have to understand the text. Now, identify other ways. And what were the outcomes that might have happened? People have said this is a problem-solving midrash on the text. And the idea is not, well, did someone do the right thing or wrong? It's there are many ways to solve problems, and we have to engage in this process. And then describe a similar problem that you've handled. This, you might be interested to know, did not start its life as the Parshat problem-solving diary. This started its life as the literature problem-solving diary, as the social studies problem-solving diary, and as the current events problem-solving diary. And basically it was who in this book is experiencing a problem, or who in the historical period we're learning about is experiencing a problem. And I say, as Jewish educators, our material is every bit as rich, not more, for having these sorts of conversations. And it doesn't have, again, it doesn't have to be that we're only working on some kind of really high level here. There are versions of this, write or draw. What happened? How did each person feel? What else could they have done? And the paper has basically 3 big rectangles for people who are less verbal or prefer to express themselves through art. And there are lots of ways to use this. Half the class could fill this out from the perspective of Sarah, and half from the perspective of Avraham or Hagar or whoever, and then compare notes. So you're building a sense of empathy and perspective taking. The last point I want to make is Rabbi Larry Kushner's point. He was involved in our deliberations as well. And this is about role models. The importance of role models in history and currently. Expose children to as many spiritually evolved human models as we can. And he relates, as part of this, the rabbinic story of, what did you do today? I went to study with my rabbi. Oh, which page in the Talmud did? We didn't study Talmud. What did you do? Midrash? No. Well, what did you do? I watched him tying his shoe. And in other words, that the living presence of the teacher, to see how the teacher interacts on a minute-by-minute basis, could be the most impactful thing in terms of how we interact as a community and how we make meaning in a community. And the truth is, adults, all of us, need help with meaning making too. And as a last point, our Jewish communities, through professional development, adult education, et cetera, are doing a lot, and thankfully doing a lot, to help all of us make meaning in these difficult times. And we're not going to be able to help our learners until we're able to work with this ourselves. So I started this by saying that this thing was called Nurturing Character Community Meaning Making Through Jewish Education. In retrospect, I probably should have called it Jewish Education Nurturing Meaning Making Through Character and Community. So this is the alternate title. And again, points to the fact that we can't give people a meaning. We can't even say, here are the steps involved in meaning making. We could connect them to communities that care. We could have them exercise the muscles of their character, and we could keep them engaged in both those processes. So we're going to take a break for Q&A. I'm going to shamelessly plug my new book. This is not written for Jewish education specifically. It's written for general education, very relevant for Jewish education. It's not a book that you read through, it's a how-to book, but for the educator in your life, a wonderful Hanukkah gift for educators or people that you love who are educators. Okay, so Q&A number 2.
All right. We have a lot of great questions that have come in. I just wanted to say to Bernard Horowitz, I love your question. I'm going to leave it out for now. But
Uh-oh.
I love the question.
Now I'm intrigued.
It's so far afield, but it's a great question. I'll send it to you after. Okay. So there's a kind of a family of questions here about safe space in our learning environments. I'm going to combine Sarah Westhoff and Iris and Karen and Alyssa. I'm going to try to put all your questions together in some form. So these participants, Professor Kress, are asking about I'm going to sort of just share a few things. So about how teachers model empathy or lack thereof, the effects of favoritism, tolerating versus working actively against bullying. There are a few mentions of bullying here. And just kind of the additional challenges of that in a virtual learning environment. How, right, there's a sense of, you can feel very exposed on Zoom in a way that's different from the classroom. This sense that sort of there's a digital record of that thing that you did or the mistake that you made. So I hope that makes sense as sort of a grouping of questions that I guess predicated on the sense that, you know, what you're talking about, the importance of building a school culture that takes into account all these values and strategies that you're talking about, right? It can only happen if we have really a safe, comfortable environment where kids don't feel criticized, where they don't feel bullied, where they feel safe making mistakes, and can do all of that online these days too, just to complicate it even further.
Well, I'm not, I mean, again, the short answer is yes, but, and the long answer is, you know, longer than we have time for, but the medium answer is that, yeah, it is part of the learning that we are at risk of ignoring, because in some ways it is much harder than sort of getting kids to know the me, Amar, me, who said what to whom. And it's an ongoing systemic, it takes more than just the classroom teacher, it takes leadership, it moves forward and backward. And the truth is that if we don't stay on it and nurture it, yeah, it's at risk of backsliding. So yeah, I mean, bullying, you know, can't go through sort of how to stop, you know, how to address bullying. There are, you know, plenty of experts and workshops and tools. And the truth is, yeah, you don't just do your anti-bullying day. I mean, if you know, you could see that it's something that needs nurturing. Online, I mean, online's interesting because you get kids who, you know, like you said, feel exposed and feel like, oh, no, now there's a digital record. You also get kids, and I've heard this from other learners, that feel more empowered, actually, that it was easy for them to kind of slink off to the back of the classroom, and you know, they weren't fast to raise their hand, so the teacher always got to the kid who, you know, kind of put their hand up first, and that Zoom is slowing things down a little bit and allowing them more time to speak. And I think that again, it's like anything else. It has to be strategic. It has to be being building communities where people care about each other. It has to be strategic. It has to be ongoing. We can't sort of pay it lip service in the name of getting to the real learning. And again, Jewish education has the benefit here of having our texts and traditions embedded in those guidelines for the way we interact in a community. For a lot of kids, it's going to be undoing a lot of years of doing this, which is why it's important to start this work early on. when social emotional learning starts in the younger grades, it has a whole lot more opportunity to work in the older grades, as opposed to starting and then unlearning basic ideas. And look, it's really hard in Jewish schools. I've heard, look, we've all heard these issues. Some parents have all the power, therefore some, and it's camps too. I've heard this in summer camps. Some parents have all the power, so those kids can do whatever they want. Some, kids are very skilled at playing this, all of that. The answer is yeah. And that's the leadership challenge for Jewish educators. I mean, that, along with, well, what's a good lesson plan about Parshat Lech Lecha? It's, how do we create those norms? And, again, I can't answer that here because it's huge, other than to say that it is, to me, that's the most important thing. You're going to, if what you take away is how we intersect in how we interact with each other in a community informed by Jewish values, and that's what you take away, you've taken a lot away. And I know there are pressures to do all kinds of other things, but none of those other things are going to happen unless that takeaway is achieved.
Let's try to squeeze in one more. So
sure.
I'm going to combine from Ann Hurwitz and Ruth Shapira. Ruth was asking, I'm just going to paraphrase Ruth. I know you can't go into all kinds of detail about strategies for achieving these kinds of culture changes that you're talking about, but can you tell us sort of globally, how would you affect these kinds of changes? Do you work with teachers? Can it happen top down from an administration? Like, how does, if you know the strategies for making the change, like how do you even approach it? And then I just wanted to add to Ruth's question a note from Anne about that these kinds of this culture needs to also exist on a staff level if they're going to make it work for students.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the last slide was very quickly, I went over it very quickly, but the truth is, yeah, I mean, how you run, a leader runs a staff meeting is a telling point in how those teachers then go out and run their classes. My colleague and student, Nancy Parks, who's a congregational school leader for a long time, and would kind of innovate this. She had this idea that why, she wants the teachers to work with the kids around breathing when they're stressed. Who works with the teachers around breathing when they're stressed? And they're stressed a lot. So yeah, she did that as part of their staff meetings. And where does it start? Look, ultimately, having leadership involved is incredibly important. And that goes without saying, it's almost a cliche. In a day school in particular, there's a lot that an individual classroom teacher can do. Spend a lot of time with the kids. Again, if they're the only one in the building working on these things, it's going to have a limited impact, but it's not for naught. So, ideally, it's a multi-level impact, a multi-level intervention and approach. The truth is that even if it's one teacher in a classroom, you could build from there. But, ideally, there's a team who's excited about that. It's rare that everyone in the school is going to be excited about it. They're always going to be, the stones in the river that the water just have to flow around. But the truth is that the river can keep flowing.
All right, thank you. There a whole other family of questions is about the corollary to this at home, and I didn't ask it because it's a whole other session, but I wanted to give honor to those questions. So I personally am planning to share some of this with my my son's third grade teachers and administrators. So thank you. I think this. I mean, I like the note that we ended on because. Right, you're talking about how crucial this is for kids. If they're going to learn as whole human beings and develop in the ways that we want and need them to in this world, right, we have to be practicing these methods ourselves. We have a lot of culture change to do, but you've articulated it in ways that I think for us non-professionals it's challenging too. So I really appreciate that, and you've shared the importance of why we need to make these shifts and some strategies for doing that. So thank you so much for bringing us into this world of your research, which really is crucial for our community and beyond. Thank you for teaching us.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me and allowing me to be with everyone today.
Great, and we look forward to seeing you all next week, where we have another practitioner from the fields coming in a sort of a clinical orientation, I should say, in a totally different way. Rabbi Michael Springer, who works in the field of clinical pastoral education, will be joining us, talking about finding meaning through suffering and brokenness. So we will, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Tani. Thank you for pointing that out. That is in 2 weeks. Next week, our series is interrupted by a special program. We will email you about that, but our Center for Interfaith Dialogue is having a special speaker. So that is taking place next week at this time. Also 1 o'clock, again, we'll email you. So the session that I mentioned with Rabbi Springer will be in 2 weeks from today. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Have a good week. We'll see you again soon.